Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And in this video, I like to move on from Rishi Sunak's problems with the COVID inquiry for a bit and focus in on the man who began it all and chose the judge, Boris Johnson. He's already been asked a lot of extremely interesting questions, so what can we expect to come out? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, amongst the lines of inquiry being pursued by former senior judge Baroness Hallett, we have the following. Whether Boris Johnson suggested going on television in March 2020 in order to be injected with COVID to prove that it was fine. This has shades to me of that Indian minister who wanted to prove that the river water was safe, so in a publicity stunt, took a glass full of it in front of cameras, drank it. It wasn't very long before he was in hospital with debilitating stomach cramps. Johnson has also been asked why he didn't sack Matt Hancock for his many failures of health secretary. Of course, the correct answer, or the truthful answer to that, would be because Hancock was doing exactly what Johnson and the Tories wanted him to. The failures were only failures from the public's point of view, not the government's. That Matt Hancock sent hospital patients into care homes without checking that they were COVID negative first, that wasn't a failure. That was because they didn't want the public to see how badly the Conservatives had stripped bare the NHS. You know, all of the fact that the Nightingale hospitals, a marvellous feat of logistics, weren't actually of any use was because there was no staff for them. But the government wanted people to see that they'd set them up and that they weren't needed, as if to say, oh, our NHS was doing fine then. No, it's because there's no staff in the Nightingale hospitals. All of these failures weren't really failures from the government's point of view. Hallett has also been asking why Johnson didn't attend emergency Cobra meetings earlier on. Was it the first 5 or something he didn't attend? Or why he was attending social events, not just during lockdown, but before lockdown, but after he'd urged the public to stop attending purely social events. Because I want to take your mind back to what actually happened in March 2020. So it began with Boris Johnson effectively saying we had a working test and trace system in place. It was there, it was working, before COVID had been certainly gotten a foothold in Britain. Inevitably, it would have been here. We had a working process. Boris Johnson put a stop to it. He said, no, we're going to let it run through the country. He went on television with the now blighted Philip Schofield, said, we're going to take it on the chin. We're going to become infected. We're all deliberately going to get infected. That's how insane this was. So that we could become immune. Without any evidence you could gain immunity from contracting COVID at all. That's what he did. And then when it went badly wrong, because he literally took away all our defences and it swept through the country. Like, oh my God, what's happened here? And he basically said to everyone, don't go to the pub. Don't go out. Stay at home. Stay at home. But he was going out. And then a week later, he went, you rascals, you didn't stop going out, so I'm going to have to put you in lockdown now. About 2 weeks too late. All that's going to come back, Essentially, there are reported to be about 150 questions posed to Boris Johnson, which seem to really drill down to why he made the decisions he did. In terms of what we might expect to come out of this inquiry, I think I would put revelations into 3 different categories. The first would be poor decisions that we already know about. When I say we, I mean those who've been paying attention. But we haven't had enough public awareness. So lots of the public don't necessarily know about it. This would include the VIP lane used to funnel vast sums of money into the hands of donors and friends, which result in delayed acquisitions of very expensive PPE at best, but completely unfit for use PPE at worst. It would also include the eat out to help out mess, delaying lockdowns, putting COVID positive patients into care homes, not mandating the wearing of face masks during a deadly pandemic of an airborne virus for many months. And when the mandate came, it was very short-lived and never really took place in schools. Where you've got a load of people in a room with still air for hours at a time. Oh, there's no need for face masks there. Yes, there was. In fact, there's a lot we know, absolutely know, which hasn't yet been widely reported. So a lot of the public don't know. The inquiry may generate at last some public interest. The second type of revelation will be things that we suspect but we don't know for certain. For example, whether Boris Johnson actually wanted to have himself injected with COVID live on television. whether he actually called for the bodies to pile high. That was one of the Hallett's questions for him, rather than lockdown after Sunak's disastrous eat out to help out the virus scheme. Just how much he partied during lockdowns, that will be part of it. I'm sure, because I know one of the questions reported was, how does he think his social activities impacted on public compliance? And I'm sure many of the suspected offences will have taken place. But we have to bear in mind that most of the really salacious suspected events were relayed to us by Dominic Cummings. Now, Dominic Cummings is a man who is almost as brazen a liar as Johnson himself, certainly self-serving, and has made no secret of the fact that he wants to destroy Johnson as punishment for his dismissal in late 2020. So we can't really accept him as a credible witness. We would need corroborating evidence for his claims. But I'd be very surprised if some of the currently suspected behaviour is not proven as a result of the inquiry. Because apart from anything else, yes, Cummings wants to destroy Johnson, but he doesn't really have to make stuff up because it's the sort of stuff Johnson would say. And the third category will, of course, be things that we don't even suspect, much less know for sure. It is almost certain that genuinely new information will come to light. Boris Johnson must have been mad to order this public inquiry. Granted, there should be an inquiry. Indeed, even if the government had genuinely tried its best, there should be one. Because although the Tories are fond of saying this was a once-in-a-century event, this is not true. It is correct to say that it has been a century since we had a pandemic this serious in Europe. Yes, okay. But modern living makes these things much more likely in future, which means they are likely to be more regular over the next century. So we may not have very much longer to go before the next one hits us. We need to learn lessons now. The next one might be just around the corner. But also the pandemic is still really going on. Governments may be able to downplay it, say, because they can manage with the illusion that it's over, but it's not. Our continued negligence means we are storing up a hell of a health time bomb for the future, including amongst our young. This is the Tories' mishandling of it is going to impact us for generations to come. At one point, I almost got to the point where I actually thought there might be some good come of it, that we might improve our attitude towards public health in general. For example, if you're ill, even if you have just got a cold, why wouldn't you wear a face mask whenever you're out in public or go to the office, go to work? Why wouldn't you? If people with any sort of illness like that could be, infectious, no matter how common, if they just masked up when out in public while ill, we could reduce the overall levels of illness and be a much healthier society. We could have had a different attitude. Less illness at work, apart from anything else, means more economic productivity. But no, the face mask became the symbol of state oppression. Oh well, back to the Middle Ages we go. But the imperative for this inquiry is huge. It's not just about holding the most irresponsible government this country has ever had to account, although that is going to be the most interesting part of it. But it is also about making sure that we do not make the same stupid, bloody mistakes in the future. Maybe it will even give us a chance to reset our attitude to the pandemic, which still exists, which many are largely ignoring. But we must at least learn lessons for the future, and the lessons need to be made public. And not just because the public have a right to know what went on from their elected representatives, but the world needs to pool its information. Because the thing about a pandemic is that we all stand or fall together. But of course, of most immediate interest is the political investigation. We want to know exactly what Johnson did, exactly what advice he was given and ignored, and exactly how he privately justified his utterly moronic decisions. Many people want Boris Johnson brought to account for the way he behaved during 2020. We need the public to see that Boris Johnson did not follow the science as he insisted. Instead, he manacled the science and dumped it in his cellar. We need the public to see just how much money was wasted, which is now contributing to our inflation. And I don't mean because of the emergency. Yes, there would have been massively increased spending, even with a competent government. And yes, that would have added to the inflation we have now. But the public need to know how much money was wasted. And I mean wasted. I don't mean in hindsight didn't work out. I mean corruptly or incompetently wasted. And I want people to know just how much of their inflation is down to that. And we won't find out the full details this side of the election. Of course, the government was so dreadful and have been so uncooperative that we cannot hope to see the conclusions for some time. But people need to see what the Conservatives did. No doubt when the results do come out in 2 or 3 years' time, those in charge will have largely moved on to be replaced by the new guard, but those new leaders will still have been in Parliament at the time. Some will have even been junior ministers. They cannot absolve themselves of blame. They will try. But the public must see the consequences of letting not just Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak or any number of others, Matt Hancock, in charge of a serious healthcare crisis. They have to see what happens when the Conservatives apply their ideology to a serious healthcare crisis. But of course, we don't have to wait for the full report to find out some spicy new information. A public inquiry is by its nature quite public. Evidence is given in public. That will be happening in a few months. So there will be lots of discussion and reporting. Once the next phase of the inquiry begins, the Conservatives are going to find themselves under another uncomfortable spotlight onto their misdeeds. And you think to yourself, is politics supposed to be this exciting? David Alan Green, he's a constitutional legal expert. He often says that constitutional law should not be exciting. It has been exciting since about 2019. But what about politics? See, part of me thinks it shouldn't be this exciting. I've been fascinated in politics from a very young age. There's probably aspects of politics I get sort of nerdily excited about that others don't. I have observed with wonder stable Tory leaderships, loony Tory leaderships, now loony Tory governments. I've seen similar range of Labour leaderships as well, but never a loony Labour government. I suspect because they can't actually exist, because Labour is only ever able to overcome the odds of the Tory media and false promises when they take elections seriously. But although I find all politics fascinating, should it really be this exciting? It's probably not good for our international image to be this exciting. But that image is buggered anyway for the time being, so we may as well grab the popcorn and take what enjoyment we can from these proceedings and the scandals which will emerge. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.